What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Nick from Mysarium, and today we are not going to be doing any sort of Mysarium Reacts or anything of that sort. Today, we are going to be ranking my all-time favorite band's albums from worst to best, best to worst. We're going to be ranking them F to S tier. And that band is Metallica. So, y'all have seen Tears before. These wonderful things. This one is all the major studio albums, so it's not going to include, Garage Inc. or S&M or S&M 2 or anything like that. You might get a little upset with what you might think my favorite Metallica albums are, but this is a personal thing for me. I am going to take production quality and musicianship into consideration, just the overall flow of the albums as well. And yeah, so let's get started. And let's start out with the extremely obvious single and only F tier, Lulu. I Am the Table.
I am the table. I am the table. I am the table.
That's really the only thing that you need to hear to know that this album was, quite frankly, trash from beginning to end. I mean, I tried several times to listen to it from beginning to end, and I just cannot make it through in one sitting. Lou Reed is insufferable. Absolutely fucking insufferable. And I don't know what was going through any of their heads when they were making this, or even came up with the idea or concept of it. I feel like it's that episode of SpongeBob.
How about this one? I call it bold and brash. More like belongs in the trash.
Yeah, so that was, that's Lulu. It belongs in F. It belongs in the garbage. It should not exist. And I am disappointed to say that my favorite band put out this, disappointment of an album. So D tier, it's gonna have to be Death Magnetic. Not that it's necessarily a bad album. I just feel like they tried to go back to their roots in the wrong way, and I wasn't super pleased with it. I mean, it wasn't bad. Just wasn't great, and it's disappointing. For being out of it for 5 years. Saint Anger came out in 2003, and we'll get to that in a moment. But then Death Magnetic, yeah, like I said, they tried to go back to the roots, and it was a good effort. But I just feel they didn't hit the mark. I feel in terms of production quality, it was lacking balls, I guess is the best way to say it. The mix wasn't very well rounded. The guitars felt really thin. Even the bass felt really thin. You could hear it. It just didn't hit the way it should have. They fixed Lars's snare, which is good. Kirk had solos, which was nice, but I feel like he went super unhinged. Like he hadn't played a solo like for an original song for, what was it? Let's see. Saint Anger was 03. Before that was Reload. So it had been a while since he had played a solo on a studio album. So I think he went a little unhinged. They unleashed him a little too soon, let him out of the pen, and he just went wild. And there were parts where the solos were really nice and tasteful, but I think overall they were pretty sloppy and kind of all over the place. And I was expecting more from Kirk, and I was pretty disappointed, in all honesty. So I think we'll move on to C tier, and we'll start off with their debut album, Kill 'Em All. It's Metallica's debut album. Old school thrash, little bit of heavy metal, but definitely more thrash and punk vibe. I didn't think it was, for 1983, it was pretty decent production quality, budget and all that. Don't really know, but I'm sure it wasn't really super high. We're talking about kids that, the only one that really had any sort of money was Lars, because of his father, and he still emanates that. It's my daddy, it's money. That kind of spoiled brat kind of vibe. But I hate to say it, Metallica wouldn't be Metallica without Lars Ulrich, regardless of however you feel about his drumming.
try getting a more solid beat.
So yeah, I think that's a good C tier. I think that's where Kill 'Em All belongs. Overall, solid musicianship was good. They were just starting to really figure out what they were doing, not quite coming into their own as of yet, but trying to find that direction. And I think this is a good baseline for them. So next, for C tier, we are going to be popping in the album that got me into Metallica, the Black Album. And I feel like this was kind of their rebirth as a band. You know, they went hard from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning to Master of Puppets to Injustice for All. And they were just going so far into their realm of musicianship and writing and composition that they could only do so much playing so fast for so long. You know, they went from Injustice for All, which had songs like, you know, Dyer's Eve and One and, you know, Shortest Straw, all these other songs that had crazy time signatures and tempo changes and all that kind of stuff, where there wasn't really a place for them to go beyond that except to kind of take it back, slow it down, reassess themselves. And that's where you get the Black Album. And I think that this is pretty much, not all, but pretty much everyone's main introduction to Metallica is the Black Album. And I think, again, because it's such a good baseline reading for what Metallica was, is, and has become and will continue to be, I think that it's a very good culmination of everything that they've done up to that point in 1991. So again, that's why I have that in C tier. And I will say, Bob Rock with the production quality on this for 1991, beautiful. Good job, Bob. So next on C tier for me for Metallica is Ride the Lightning, their sophomore album. And this is where you kind of start to see a little bit more of their composition start to come through. Again, still pretty thrashy, but for the most part, they're kind of leaning towards that slightly slower little bit of heavy metal there. And for only being voice crack, for only being released 1 year after the debut album, Kill 'Em All, you could hear a significant change. You can see that they still kept with their roots, but you can hear the production quality is a little bit better. The one gripe I have about it, I'm pretty sure they've mentioned it, is the amount of reverb that they used on the guitars in that album is just phenomenal. Like, it's too much. Kind of why I put it in C tier. You know, not bad, not their best, good average Metallica album. So next we'll move on to B tier. So we're getting into the ones that I like a little bit more. And first one that's going to get thrown in there is Load. I really enjoyed Load the first time I heard it. I was maybe about, 13, 14 when I first heard Load. I mean, the Black Album came out when I was 10 months old. My mother's the one that got me into Metallica. She got the album when it came out. So I have been listening to the Black Album since August of 1991. That's really all I knew of Metallica besides Black Album and the one song, Master of Puppets, not the entire album. And then I saw this album cover, I was like, Metallica didn't make any other albums. I was a stupid teenager, I didn't know better. And then I listened to it, I was like, okay, yeah, so that's the same singer. Wow, okay, no, this is good. I like this a lot. So production quality on Load, light years, in my opinion, above the Black Album. The composition, light years above the Black Album. And the Black Album's composition, overall musicianship, very good. And that's the problem, is that a lot of people just want to, not shaming anybody, they just want to listen to the music and enjoy it. For me, being a composer, being a musician, I like to break things down and listen to the layers and try and figure out why this song is good and, figure out why it makes me feel a certain way. And they were very, very experimental with both Load and Reload. And I think Load was a very, very good first step in that kind of experimental direction they were going after the Black Album. Kind of to touch on the Black Album briefly, you can hear in the Black Album little bits left over, we'll say, through the Never. It's the riff. And That feels like a leftover riff from And Justice for All. If you've listened to that album in its entirety and then you listen to that song, you're like, oh wow, this song could have been on And Justice for All. But then you get to songs on the Black Album, like if you listen to My Friend in Misery and then listen to Load, you think, oh wow, that could be on the Load album. So it's like I said, that kind of midway point, putting it in C. Load, to me, belongs in B tier. There's just something right about that statement. Load belongs in B tier. And right next to Load in B tier is Master of Puppets. This is not an A tier album for me. Really, the only reason, maybe it's just because it's a time period thing, production quality, for the most part. Again, came out in 1986, can't really fault them for that. Technology was limited at the time. If this was maybe, I don't know, we'll say 15 years ago, I would have probably put Master of Puppets in A tier. Solid tracks, front to back, could listen to this album over and over again. But to me, even though it has aged well, it hasn't aged well enough for my liking, especially with the recording quality. I could see myself in 10 more years thinking, wow, I used to think that this was good. One of those. But yeah, compositionally, bar none, a rank above Ride the Lightning, and they cut out that ridiculous reverb, which they needed to do. And again, for 2 years after Ride the Lightning, 3 years after their, debut album, good job, Metallica. Good job, guys. Proud of you. That really does it for B tier. So now we're gonna move on to the A tier, and this is where people are gonna start hating me. We're gonna start off nice. And now you're looking at the 3 albums that I've got left. Where the hell are those gonna go? So, And Justice for All, while it was the biggest troll and slap in the face, in my opinion, to Jason, to mix the bass as far out of the entire production as possible, this is, in my opinion, one of the top 5 best Metallica albums. Technically the 4th, I guess. I don't know. We'll figure it out. That's what we're doing here. And Justice for All, in terms of composition and musicianship and overall feel of the album, themes of the album, which Metallica has explained, over the years, that they don't really have, like, they write their lyrics, none of them really have a set meaning. You can kind of put your own meaning to them, but based on what is actually written and what is actually presented in the lyrical content from my standpoint, I really like the lyrical content of this album. I like the musicianship of this album. Again, the production quality, poor Jason, I'm sorry, dude. Like, that was, like I said, a slap in the face. But it worked out in the end. Because, again, front to back, there's not one song on that entire album that I would skip. Let me rephrase that. I think the only song that I have skipped, not because it's a bad song, but just because I wasn't really in the mood for it, is Dyer's Eve. Not a bad song by any means, just not really in the mood for it kind of deal. Next, don't worry, it's not an S tier. Saint Anger, for me, goes in A tier. And here's why. This was the second full-length Metallica album that I had ever listened to. Again, started with Black Album, knew about Master of Puppets. Saint Anger came out when I was 13, at a very formative and a very rough part in my childhood. And this album spoke to me, with the exception of Lars' terrible garbage can snare drum that everyone has been beating on for actually 18 years. For 18 years, we've smashed on his terrible snare drum. That aside, the production on this, the last Bob Rock production, very, very, very good. Lyrical content spoke to me in volumes, and I think a lot of people nowadays really could learn a lot from the lyrical content of Saint Anger. It's very deep, it's very real, it's very touching in a very emotional way. It really digs deep into those, again, angry and sad and depressed emotions. And a lot of people nowadays are experiencing a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think I think it would actually be very important in a way for people to go in and listen, really truly listen to the lyrics on this album. Truthfully, I've always said that Saint Anger is one of my top favorite Metallica albums. I'm one of those guys. I love, with the exception of that garbage Lulu, I love all their albums. I do really like Death Magnetic, and I like all the songs on it. I like all the songs on all the albums, and I will bring up my iTunes and show you that I've got every single one. I could bring the camera over and show you that I have their entire discography. I still need to get S&M 2. I know. Don't bug me about it. I'm sorry. But I truly believe Saint Anger belongs in A tier. No questions asked. Next, and second to last, which one is Nick gonna put in A tier? With the remaining one going in S tier. 3, 2, 1. Bam. Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Definitely goes in A tier. Fight me in the comments. This is one of the best Metallica releases in the past 15 years. No question. And here's why. Hardwired to Self-Destruct did to Metallica in modern days what the Black Album did in 1991. The Black Album in 1991 was a culmination of everything that they had been, what they were, and what they were going to be up to that point. And I think Hardwired to Self-Destruct nailed that on the fucking head. From their formation in 81 to their first release in 83, all the way till now, and whatever they're going to produce in the future. Hardwired to Self-Destruct does that to a T. James's vocals soar on this album. The lead guitars rip on this album from both James and Kirk. The bass is thick and juicy from Mr. Robert Trujillo. The drums surprisingly don't suck from Lars Ulrich on this album. The overall sound is full, and it's welcoming, and it's warming, and it still hits you in the fucking face every single time you listen to it. There's not one bad song on this album. And I truthfully cannot find one thing that I dislike about this album, except for the fact that it has slightly too much new school feel. For Metallica, it feels too digital. And it's also the same issue, or a similar issue to what I had with Death Magnetic. It felt too digital. It didn't feel whole. It didn't feel quite as full as I would have liked it, but it didn't sound thin, which was... that's a big issue for me, is when a mix sounds thin, it's like, oh, they didn't give a shit about this. They just threw it on a disc and sent it out to the stores. With composition and musicianship aside. That's why Death Magnetic's in D tier and not in a higher tier, amongst other things. But Hardwired to Self-Destruct hit all those points very nicely, with the exception of sounding too digital. And that leaves one album left for S tier. And that, my friends, is Reload. When it comes to the overall sound of Metallica, I feel like this is really where they flourished. Yes, they started as a thrash band, as a heavy metal band, but this kind of alt-rock, heavy metal kind of vibe that they had going, they nailed it. And they came out of the gate strong with Load and destroyed it. Absolutely destroyed it with Reload. From Fuel all the way to Fixer, tracks 1 to 13, there is not one bad song. Lyrically, compositionally, production quality, solos were great, rhythms were great, bass was great, drums were great, because they all fit each individual song and the overall theme and feel of the album perfectly. I feel like Load and Reload were when James's voice were at his best in terms of overall sound. I feel like they nailed their guitar tones and their bass tones and the drum sounds. I feel like everything that Metallica should have been from the beginning in terms of production and composition is in Reload. And people don't give this album enough credit. And the other issue is that people are so attached to the name Metallica that they refuse to remove themselves from that image that they have of them. They think, oh, Metallica's a thrash metal band. They should make more albums like Master of Puppets. Or Metallica's a really, you know, fast, heavy metal band. They need to make more albums like, you know, Kill 'Em All. Or, oh, they were great in the 90s. They need to make more albums like the Black... Like, no, stop. Put your prejudice aside and really listen to it. Stop with your elitist bullshit and listen to this album. Because truthfully, wholeheartedly, opinion or not, this is, no questions asked, the best Metallica album put out in terms of production, composition, songwriting. Every aspect of it is perfect. I wish that there was a way I could do like a half tier, because I truly feel like Hardwired to Self-Destruct should be like A.5 instead of just A. It doesn't hit that S tier for me, but it should be half a step up. I don't even want to include Lulu. Like, can I just like delete this? I'll do this. So this here is what I would rank my personal favorites list. And this isn't, you know, S through F. This is literally just favorite to least favorite. In this order, ranked: Reload, Saint Anger, and Justice for All, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, Load, Black Album, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, Death Magnetic, Lulu. So what are your thoughts? What do you think are the F through S tier of Metallica albums? What are your personal favorite albums? What are your favorite songs? If you think I'm stupid or wrong, post a comment down below. Anything else I mentioned, post a comment down below. Let me know what's going on, people. Do you even like Metallica? Do you prefer Megadeth or Anthrax or Slayer? If you really think Anthrax is better than Metallica, teach their own. If you think Megadeth is better than Metallica, you have a fighting chance, not vocally. And if you like Slayer better than Metallica, they don't belong in the same genre. They don't. That's just me, though. But yeah, leave your opinions and your comments down below, and we'll talk about it. So, yeah, this was an episode of Mysarium Makes a List, I guess. And we'll see you all on whatever my next video is going to be. Take care.